But on social media, there's this meme of an idea that a bookstore is a place where the people who work there just sit around and read all day. It's just their cozy vibes of that's what they do for work.
Welcome to the Curious Cat Bookshop podcast, the podcast of the independent bookstore of Winsted, Connecticut, creating a literary community in Northwest Connecticut, bringing our local authors to the world and the world to our community.
So, you want to start a bookstore? Someday, I'd love to retire and start a bookstore. That's the kind of thing that I see on social media a lot. I can't wait to start my bookstore and read all day. I love these sentiments. It's so cozy. Bookstores are our happy places. Just this week, 5 people came up to me separately and told me that our bookstore, the Curious Cat Bookshop in Winsted, Connecticut, is their happy place. And that makes me so excited. What that means is that we're creating the feeling when people come into our store that they really could just spend all day and read. And that is the goal of creating a bookstore. I set out to create a space where people want to spend time. I set out to create a space where they can talk about books with other book people and meet bookish friends, and in general to create a literary community. So that's the goal. And I hope that we're accomplishing that. Hearing that from people that we're creating that happy space for them, that they consider it their happy place, is wonderful. But on social media, there's this meme of an idea that a bookstore is a place where the people who work there just sit around and read all day. It's just their cozy vibes of that's what they do for work. Like I said, I love that we're projecting this illusion because I want people to come into the store to feel that way. But I also think that if you're really truly thinking about starting a bookstore, you need to know what the reality is. And the reality is that if you're starting a bookstore, you're starting a business. And if you're starting a business, especially in the book business, there are some specific things that you need to know about the book business to make that successful. I am Stacy Whitman, if I didn't say that before. I currently am an editor-at-large for 2 books, which is an imprint of Lee & Low, and I'm the owner of the Curious Cat Bookshop in Winsted, Connecticut. I've worked in publishing for more than 25 years, and when I wasn't working in publishing, I was working in something adjacent, like I was being a reporter and photographer at the local newspaper in my hometown, or I was typesetting college textbooks, or I was editing phone books for a living to get through college, or I was transcribing Overland Trails journals, or my first job out of college, I was an editor at a trade magazine called Electrical Apparatus, which was the industrial electrical motors aftermarket trade magazine. So I have been in this business for a very long time, and I have a master's degree in children's literature, and I worked at a B&N in grad school as well. I've had a lot of different jobs in this industry. I started 2 books back in 2009 after I left Wizards of the Coast. I was actually laid off with a lot of other people in the financial crisis of 2008. And back in 2009, I started it independently with a Kickstarter campaign. And that successful Kickstarter campaign got the attention of Lee & Low, where I work now. And they said, well, why don't you come to New York and start it as an imprint? And that's what I've been doing ever since. And then I just recently stepped down from my position as publisher in October so that I could focus a little bit more on my bookstore, have a little bit more time. So I started the Curious Cat Bookshop. Backing up, in the middle of the pandemic, I was living in New York City, and I needed a little bit more space. And so first time in my life, I had enough savings. My student loans were on pause, and I had enough savings that I could save up to put a down payment on a house. And this was the area, Northwest Connecticut, where I found a house that I could actually afford, because this area is not quite affordable for somebody on a publishing salary. When I first moved up to this house, I was driving 45 minutes to the nearest bookstore. So then I got the idea of, well, I started one business. Maybe I could do a business plan and see if it's viable to, maybe this area could support a bookstore. So I started doing a business plan. I started meeting with my SBA advisor, the Small Business Administration. It's completely free. You can meet with an advisor to help you start a business. And I've been flying by the seat of my pants ever since. We started as a pop-up back in early 2023, and we opened our brick and mortar in August of 23, and we've just been trying to figure out how to make this business profitable ever since, and hoping, that someday, maybe this year, I'll be able to pay myself out of the bookstore. So just sharing that little bit about what running a bookstore means, and what it doesn't mean is getting rich, either quick or slow. And what it doesn't mean is reading all day. What it does mean is a lot of physical labor. There's a lot of lifting of boxes of books. In fact, this weekend I'm doing a pop-up, which meant that I had to lift a carload of crates of books into my car and then into the inn where I have the pop-up. And then I'll have to lift what's left home. And that means that my back needs some strength because I'm already feeling a twinge. What it also means is that it's possibly a money pit. And I'll get into that in a minute. But it also means community. It means expanded friendship circles. It means wanting to read everything and feeling constantly behind on your reading. And that's just life in any part of the book world. And a lot of business stuff. Imagine, Lego Kitty here saying business. And I just want to caveat that I'm speaking from my experience as starting a new bookstore. And by that I mean I sell books that are new. Brand new from the publisher. I'm not selling used books. Used books are an entirely different business model, and your startup costs are going to be different and the profit margins are going to be different. So I just want to say I am talking about new books that I'm buying from a distributor or the publisher. We have the ability to order any book that's in print. What does that mean? It means that a used bookstore might be able to find a book for you that is no longer being reprinted by the publisher. In print means that if they run out of stock, they're going to reprint it. Out of stock means that it's no longer in the warehouse. Out of print means they're never going to put it back in print. That might mean it's out of copyright. It might not. So those are all various definitions that we don't have time to get into here, but I just wanted to clarify our terms. So what resources did I use to find the information that I needed to start a bookstore? Well, first of all, I've got 25 years of experience in the book business, and so that gave me a little bit of a head start, yes. But the bookstore business is very different from the publishing business. Bookstore business is a product-based business. And the publishing business is a product-based business, but it's a lot more services because you have to have editorial, you have to have marketing, you have to have the acquisition of the book, and that is very complicated. We can get into that in another video. If anybody's interested, let me know in the comments how the acquisitions process works, because I can talk all about that if you want. But in the bookstore business, you have to consider your margins of buying the books from publishers or a distributor. And then you have to consider what you have left to be able to pay all your other expenses. So that's a little bit different from the publishing side of things. I mean, you've got different inputs and different outputs. So I went to the Small Business Administration, like I said. I got an advisor who was able to advise me on what kind of startup capital I needed to be able to buy the bookshelves, to be able to buy my inventory, to be able to buy my POS system. I'll pause there because I'm getting ahead of myself. So the Small Business Administration, they have a whole bunch of free resources that you can use, including meeting with an advisor, but also just free resources on how to build a business plan and all sorts of how to make decisions about what kind of business that you want to do, what works for you, and how much money you need to get it started, and all the various considerations that you need to know going into starting a business. The Women's Business Development Council here in Connecticut is amazing, and they're also a great resource, and they also have free business counseling for all sorts of subjects. So I constantly am taking classes from them. They have grants for startups and for experienced businesses. So those were really great general resources. I'll link them in the description below. The American Booksellers Association is really, really important if you're going to be starting a bookstore. They have a whole bunch of resources that are very specific to the bookselling industry. And the reason why I say that is because the bookselling industry is both ancient and trying to be modern. Sorry for the interruption. The foster kitty was trying to eat the cord attached to my camera. So my point is that this cozy, retro, nostalgic vibe that we have about bookstores can be lovely, but to compete and to be successful, independent bookstores also have to be very tech savvy, have to have a really great website, and be able to know how to reach their community where they are, which is on social media and on email, and to get them in the door or to get them to buy online. So you need to know both. And the American Booksellers Association has been really great about... Kitty, no! out you go, out you go. And the American Booksellers Association has been really great about supporting the industry in its needs to update its systems. So for example, I use the Indie Commerce platform, which is run by the American Booksellers Association, for my website. And that gives me access to all the books that are in print, even if I'm not carrying it in my bookstore. And that matters because I can let my customers know, hey, I can get that book for you. It might take a couple of days or a week, but we can get it for you, and not just rely on what's in our store. The American Booksellers Association does require a membership fee, so you need to be pretty serious about being ready to start the journey to start a bookstore before you have access to their resources, and I'll get to the specifics in just a minute, but it is really, really well worth it. And once you're really into it, the Professional Booksellers School is a really great resource where you can take classes both independently and as a group. I'm taking their event management class right now, and that is a 6-month class where I'm really digging into how to evaluate my events in the store and whether they're working or not, and how to make judgments on what is working and what isn't working. These resources have been essential to me being able to start a bookstore even with the experience that I already have. And then there are so many considerations for how you can start and the money that you need to get there. Where will you get your inventory? How will you pay for it? Generally, you need to pay up front with a publisher or with Ingram, the main distributor for bookstores right now, when you're first opening an account. So how will you do that? And should you really use a credit card? You probably should have some capital in the bank for that. And that means a lot of money in the bank. What point of sale system will you use? Will it be connected to your inventory tracking system? Will it be connected to your website? There's a wide variety of, like, people just decide to use Shopify or Square, but then they can't figure out how to order electronically from the publishers, or they can't track how well the sales have been doing for a particular title. There are a variety of point of sale systems available to us in the book world, and some of them are book centric and some of them are not. And this gets back to what I was talking about with the Indie Commerce platform, because having access to all the books in print, like what I'm talking about is being able to know this book is in print and I can order it from Ingram, or I can order it from Penguin Random House, or whatever publisher that I'm ordering it from, and being able to connect that in your system from inventory on the way all the way through sales is really important for a bookstore. So a book-centric POS system is highly important, and that's where the American Booksellers Association has lists that help you to figure out what those are. Like I said, you can use Shopify or you can use Square. Currently, I use a combination of Basil, which is a book-centric POS system on the back end, which is connected to Square on the front end, which makes it modern and very nice for the customer to use, and they can use tap to pay and all that kind of stuff. And Basil also connects to Indie Commerce. It's all connected. There are 3 different systems, and so they have to be able to talk to each other, but each system does what it needs to do. But there's also POS systems like Book Manager that does all that together, but it's much more expensive. So those are the kinds of considerations that you might need to take into account. So what point of sale system will you use? What inventory tracking system will you use? And what ordering system will you use? Will that ordering system be able to directly connect to the publisher so that you can send your orders electronically when they're ready and that you can just build them as you go? Or will you have to do it manually? And how will you keep track of that manually? It gets very complicated. How will you afford rent for the space that you choose if you're going to go brick and mortar? Retail rent is kind of astronomical in a lot of places, so you need to consider that. What will the space look like? Do you have a vision of this deep, dark, medieval bookstore vibe, or modern and clean and slick? And what will the lighting look like? And what will the path through your store look like for retail experience? What is the shopping experience going to be in your store? Personally, I went with IKEA bookshelves, and I got secondhand bookshelves from stores that were closing, a toy store and a bookstore that were both closing. I spent the year before starting my bookstore going around town and picking up free tables off of Facebook Marketplace and off the side of the road and refinishing them. I learned how to refinish furniture. So if you go into our bookstore, the tables in the store, you will see they have been refinished. Either they've been repainted, or there's the stickers are on this gorgeous desk that I found at an attorney's office around the corner from my house. that was this mid-century orangey thing that when I stripped it and refinished it was this gorgeous walnut veneer. I love it so much. It's beautiful. And now it's in the store. And I found gondola shelves with end caps from a local bookstore, and they were old and they were water damaged, but I was able to save a lot of money because normally these shelves might cost $1,500 and I bought them for $200 a piece. And then I repaired them and I repainted them. So I probably spent about $300 a piece instead of $1,500 a piece. Can you be scrappy like that? Can you be resourceful to be able to outfit your store if you don't have all the money that it would take to make your shelves look like the vision that you've got? And are you willing to compromise on the vision, or do you really need the money to create $50,000 worth of shelving in your store? So that's the questions that you need to ask yourself. What will your mix of inventory be? Will it be new? Will it be used? Will it be a mix of new and used? Will you have sidelines? And if so, what kinds of sidelines? What kind of insurance policy will you need? Who will design your logo? Who will design all the materials like the signage in your store? The signage of your store, like out front. Now, in the store, I don't have the signage that I want in the store yet because I haven't had the budget for it. Right now, it's just printouts with a fancy font in a Canva because I haven't been able to figure out that signage yet. So it's still a work in progress a year and a half in. Who will design all your other materials, including the sign out on your brick and mortar store? How big a space do you need? What kind of mix between kids and adult will you have? And what kind of space, like how big? 1,500 square feet, 3,000 square feet. Can you afford that larger space if you want that? How many sales per square foot do you need to be able to afford the square footage that you want? Can your community actually support a bookstore at the rate you need it to justify all these costs? That's the last question. That's where joining the ABA comes in and getting access to the Abacus survey, which they survey all the bookstores that want to participate, and it's anonymized. Each bookstore gets their own results back as how they compare to the most profitable bookstores, the bookstores that are making this much versus that much, and what percentage those stores are spending on rent, what percentage those stores are spending on cost of goods sold, what percentage those stores are spending on payroll, and that kind of thing. That's what the Abacus survey can tell you, and that is once you start to understand, and it took me probably about 2 years to really understand how that breakdown relates to the numbers that I'm dealing with. But now that I understand it, I can go, oh, wow, okay, I can then budget according to that. And if I'm hitting those budgets, then I feel like I'm heading toward profitability. I also highly recommend the ABA's Booked podcast. That's BOOK capital ED, and you can get it on any platform to help you to know the book industry. They're covering all sorts of book selling topics from very specific to very general. They're talking about accounting. They're talking about how you recommend particular books. They're talking about book banning. They're talking about all sorts of things that are very relevant to this industry and that you need to know. I was really helped by the SBA and the WBDC on a lot of basic business information, but bookstores are weird and you need book industry specific information. So the American Booksellers Association is such a good resource when it comes to that. Also, subscribe to Publishers Weekly. And if you join the American Booksellers Association, you will get a subscription automatically to Publishers Weekly. Subscribe to their free email newsletters, subscribe to them, to the actual magazine if you're not going to join ABA just yet, because that will give you book industry news that you need to know about authors, about how the publishing industry works and which publishers are in the game. And that gives you an idea of who you need to buy from. Once you're ready to dive into committing to start a bookstore, that's when you join the ABA as a provisional member to access these resources. It's a few $100s, but you'll know it's an investment in your business. Speaking of investments, how much money do you need to start a bookstore? That's the big question, right? A lot. A lot. My original business plan, and I thought I was being pretty conservative compared to other people that I've talked to who invested quite a lot more. I needed about $150,000 according to my business plan to really start my bookstore right. I was not able to raise that much. So I actually ended up starting on less than half of that. Way less. I started with a yearly bonus that I got from my job, my tax return. My friend decided that she wanted to support a independent bookstore, so she gave me a nice investment, but it was also nowhere near the original investment that I knew I needed. This was more of a bare bones, can I start small and how do I do that kind of investment. Then, once I opened, I didn't pay myself. Every bit that we earned in the business went back into the business, either paying back my friend, which I'm paying her on a monthly basis, we're just treating it like a loan, or I'm putting it right back into the business last year it was buying more bookshelves so that we could fill out the store. It was buying more inventory. It was making sure that we had enough in the store and that the store looked great. Every penny has gone back into the bookstore to make sure that the bookstore can be what we want it to be for people to come in and have a good experience. A bookstore is a business that has a large list of expenses, including paying the owner, hopefully. I do hope to eventually pay myself. And so this is the list of inputs and outputs that you have to think about as a bookstore business owner. Inputs, sources of revenue, like sales. That's the obvious one. Outputs, cost of goods sold, that's generally going to be about 50%. I'm going to get into some numbers in a minute. Shipping and postage, supplies and material, advertising and promotion. If you have a car for the business specifically, not your personal car, if you got a bookmobile, that kind of thing, then you're going to be considering those kinds of numbers. Bank service charges, business licenses and permits, your sales tax permit, charitable contributions, computer and internet, continuing education, contract labor, dues and subscriptions, insurance, loan fee expenses, meals and entertainment, merchant account fees, miscellaneous, office expenses, payroll. Payroll is going to be a big one. Payroll processing, payroll taxes, postage and delivery, professional services, rental payments, that's your rent on your space, salaries, small tools and equipment, software and apps, subcontractors, taxes, telephone, travel, utilities, website development. So when I sell one book, the ideal breakdown of how costs generally go. And these aren't exact numbers because, some categories slide around because percentages, but these are the percentages that I am thinking about as I am selling one book at the beginning of the month. Cost of goods sold, I'm aiming for 50%. So 50% off the top immediately is just for paying for the books that you're bringing in. So you only have 50% left. Sometimes that might be 40%. Depending on, are you buying it from a distributor? Are you buying it from the publisher? Sometimes the amount that you're paying to the publisher is less than 50%. But the average that you want to aim for when you're talking about the cost of goods sold overall is 50%. You're doing really, really well if you're about at 50%. 45% is probably going to be the average of where a lot of bookstores end up because a lot of publishers and distributors take more than 50%. Payroll, if you are going to aim for profitability, your payroll shouldn't be more than 20-ish%, maybe a little bit more than that. Rent, you want to aim for 10%. And that leaves 20% for that whole list that we just went through of all your other. And that includes, when I said merchant fees, that is the cost of taking credit card payments, which can be upwards of 3 to 5% right now. So that really leaves you about 15% for all your other expenses, plus whatever kind of profit that you might be able to bring home as the owner, because you're not paying yourself as payroll generally. It depends on the business and how you're structuring it, but most people don't pay themselves as payroll. They pay themselves through what's called an owner draw. The profit margin that I am seeing from a wide variety of bookstores, if you are really lucky, you might make a profit margin of 5 to 10%, maybe. 5 to 10%. So let's imagine that you are Kathleen Kelly and Joe Fox comes in and says, I think that you're making $300,000 a year in revenue. And if Kathleen Kelly's profit margin is 5%, Kathleen Kelly is making $15,000 a year. After paying all her employees who are so sweet that she wants to keep on, after paying for all those cute books in the store. And she does have some used books in there. She has some rare books, notice. And so those are going to be a different profit margin. But if Kathleen Kelly is making 5% profit margin on brand new books in the shop around the corner, she's making about $15,000 a year. And even in 1998, that was not that much money. That was a really nice apartment for making $15,000 a year. She must have had some family money. So, if you've ever wondered how bookstores stay in business, welcome to the club. Many of those numbers I just listed are fixed. My rent doesn't increase as I sell more books. So the more books I sell, the less that percentage of our overall revenue the rent becomes. And so if I can make my rent go down to 5% of our overall revenue for the month, we're doing a whole lot better than if it's 10%, right? After a certain point, my saving 10% of our income for every sale for rent can go toward other things, and the overall percentage of sales that goes toward rent dips down below the expected 10%. Do you see where I'm going here? But that's a bare minimum that I'm aiming for with my bookstore. There's a bare minimum number of books that a bookstore has to sell every month to be able to make ends meet, to be able to pay the bills, to be able to pay their employees. And so that's why you often see bookstores talking about how many books that they need to sell to stay in good shape. For us, and if an average book costs $20, so you've got the adult book that costs $32, $35, $40, adult hardcover. Over here, you've got a children's paperback that might cost $5 or $10. And so if the average of that is about $20, and that's just picking a number that's round, if the average book costs $20, then we need to average here at the Curious Cat Bookshop to make all our goals 1,250 books a month to be able to pay the rent, pay myself. That's the ideal. We've never at the moment in our first year sold more than 780 books a month. So that gives you a sense of, okay, we've got this far and we need to go this much further to be able to pay myself a living wage or pay myself at all. Because it's not even a living wage that I'm aiming for, because I do have another job, but I have to pay myself a little bit, or why am I running a business, right? This is expected in the first few years of growing a business. The idea of plowing your profits back into the business to be able to grow the business, that's expected, right? That's how you grow a business. But you also have to figure out, if you are going to try and pay yourself, how do you make that business profitable? Not just break even, but profitable. And like I said, this is not a get-rich-quick scheme, whether fast or slow. But you do need to try and figure out how to make it sustainable. So how do I live, especially as a single woman with no partner I'm not relying on a partner for insurance. I need my health insurance. How do I, as a single person running this business, make ends meet? And like I said, I kept my day job. Up until last October, I kept my full-time in publishing, and then I stepped down. And that's why I'm not in the bookstore on a daily basis, and why I had to hire somebody to be in the bookstore on weekdays so that I could work my job. I suppose I could make more money myself if I didn't have my employees to pay, but I was making more money at my day job than I was at the bookstore, so you have to balance that out. And how do you get health insurance if you lose your day job? That kind of thing. And I really love my authors. I really love my editing. Honestly, I was pretty burnt out when I started the bookstore, and I was trying to do something that brought back a community to me and that brought back my love of reading. And then I can also apply that love of reading in other ways. But I needed my health insurance. I needed my much larger full-time salary at that time. I needed the credit rating that having that full-time salary made possible so that I could get other kinds of financing, because eventually into our second year, I ended up getting a home equity line of credit so that I could invest a little bit more into the bookstore and do some things that I couldn't do otherwise. Being a new business, it's really hard to get a loan. I was told it'd be relatively easy to get an SBA startup loan. That was actually not true. I applied like 3 times and I didn't get it. And so that's why I ended up needing that home equity loan to be able to balance out some things in that second year. So I had no wiggle room in the bookstore's budget to go back and pay myself out of any profits. Everything had to go back into the bookstore to pay for bookshelves, more inventory, more bookshelves. My sister painted our mural basically with the cost of paint and the cost of flying her out here for a week. And then I got to visit with my sister for a week, and that was a lot of fun. But things like that helped me to stretch our budget. I started out with less than half the startup capital, like I said, that I wanted to start with. And maybe that showed up at first. maybe the store wasn't really all that impressive at first, but I was able to slowly improve it over time and build my equity in the business. And now we're starting to get ahead. And maybe this year I can even pay myself, which of course will immediately go to paying down that home equity line of credit, of course. That's some realism for you, I'm afraid. And that's just the numbers. That doesn't even get to how many hours that I've put into classes from the SBA and the Women's Business Development Council to learn how to manage a business better. It doesn't get into applying for grants for the business. I've gotten several grants for the business that have really, really helped. Local grants, a WBDC grant, poring over the numbers and wondering if we're going to be able to make it work. Learning how to manage social media. And I'm especially shouting out High Season here on YouTube, by the way, because I've learned a lot from them about social media and from other YouTubers about how to do podcasts and YouTube, learning how to build an email list, which I'm still trying to figure out, learning how to promote our business when we have no local newspapers. So local media is really hard. Networking and coordinating with other booksellers to promote big cooperative things like Independent Bookstore Day and the Connecticut Book Trail. And a shout out to Megan Hayden over at Riverbend Bookshop in Glastonbury and West Hartford, because she has been the driver of the Connecticut Book Trail, and she's been the organizer, and it's been really wonderful. Planning, packing, loading up, setting up, taking down, and carting around cratefuls of books to pop-ups and school book fairs, and listening to and reading business books to figure out how these percentages even work that I just explained, networking with local business owners to figure out how we can promote each other, joining the local chamber of commerce, following issues that affect my industry like book bans, reaching out to authors to plan events, and then figuring out all the other events that we're going to do in the bookstore and creating the graphics for those events. And like I said, taking the classes to figure out how to do successful events, putting together the month's calendar and getting it on 3 or 4 different kinds of calendars to be able to promote those events, writing the emails to let those people know that the events are happening, learning how to do employment taxes and figure out how my payroll processor didn't file the form that the IRS is demanding that I file. Just in general, it's a lot. It's a lot. But I'm also really enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun with it. Every day is a little bit different. Nowadays, I've stepped back from my full-time job to 3 days a week as an editor at large. So like I said, I get to keep working with my authors and I get to keep working on the creation of books, but I also love all the work that I'm doing to grow this little business of mine. And none of what I'm saying here is meant to discourage anybody from starting a bookstore. I just want to give you some realism that you can be grounded in. Like I said at the beginning, 5 people this week have told me that our bookstore is their happy place. That matters a lot to me. All this work is worth it. My mental health is in a much better place. Do I have time to read more books? Not really. Yes and no. I mean, sometimes we'll get some downtime when I'm actually in the store at the front desk as opposed to running around doing all these other things that I listed. And sometimes if we don't have enough customers, I might listen to an audiobook. I'd rather have customers in. Sometimes I have too much on my plate and I just have to take it one day at a time. And I hate to burst any bubbles. I'm really sorry if I'm bursting anybody's bubble. But if you really do want to start a business like a bookstore that celebrates your love of reading and creates a community of readers, of a literary community who feel the same way, well, starting an independent bookstore really is a great path as long as you're ready for doing the work. Good luck. And if you are local to us in Northwest Connecticut, we're at 386 Main Street in Winsted, Connecticut. And if you're not, CuriousCatBookshop.com. You can see all our events under the events tab. Thanks for listening. Bye.